Welcome. My name's Dan McConnell. I'm General Manager of Home Inspector Pro, and just going over some of the details of how to handle PDF forms and how they're populated within the Home Inspector Pro program. As part of this, we're going to go through and walk through how to create a basic form, as well as get into some more of the details of actually editing and populating your forms as you're doing your inspections. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop up in the chat. I actually need to bring the chat up. There we go. Feel free to chat and we can answer any questions as they come along. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So within Home Inspector Pro, you're able to go through and take PDFs that have form fields, and form fields are actually fields designated on the form that are able to be populated with content. And you're able to take information from different sections of your template as you're doing your inspection and have those populated into the fields on the form. So there are two parts to setting up the PDF form fields. You need to, one, go through and actually set up in your PDF the fields of information that are going to be able to be collected. And this involves going through and actually creating the form fields and then actually giving them names. And then within the Home Inspector Pro program, you then map the fields on the PDF to the fields of information within Home Inspector Pro. Once you've set that up, when you're actually going to do the inspection or your inspectors are doing the information, the process of doing the inspection is exactly the same as before. They select entries within selection panels and damage panels, fill out the information like they normally would within Home Inspector Pro as part of an inspection, either on desktop or mobile. And then when they go to generate the report, those fields of information are just pulled from where they are mapped within Home Inspector Pro. You can either have the forms be standalone, where it's just the cover page and then the form information, or you can have them just be integrated as part of any other inspection. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. One caveat to setting up the forms is it does require that you actually go through and use a PDF editor to create the fields. You can't use just like a basic PDF viewer like Adobe Reader or the PDF viewer built into Google Chrome or Edge. You have to use an actual dedicated PDF editor. I've gone through and there really are not a lot of good free options for PDF editors. All of the ones are paid options, and usually you can get away with just the basic version. Just make sure that it offers the solution for PDF editing, but the actual creation of the fields is done in a PDF editor. And I go ahead and in the chat there are links for three very common ones: Adobe Acrobat Pro, which is either Pro or Pro DC, which is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. You can either purchase it as a standalone program, or you can purchase it on a month-to-month basis from Adobe as part of their Creative Cloud, and you can get just Acrobat standalone. That is the original editor for PDFs and is the most common one to use. One that I use regularly is Foxit Phantom PDF, and they make a very good PDF editor, or PDF Exchange editor. Both of them are very good. They work in the same basic fashion. The idea of them is that there is the content of the form and the fields, and then the names and formatting of the fields on the page. But just keep that in mind, is that you do have to have a specific software for doing that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so the first thing that to actually create the PDF forms is you need to create the form itself. And so I've go ahead and shared my screen here, and I've created just a very basic Word document. And the idea is that this is going to be like an introduction summary that includes the basic information. Now, this is one that includes all the information that's on the cover and some of the pieces from the template. This is just an example. You could get as detailed or as simple as you'd like to. Some people would go through and create, you could use this to create form letters, where you actually have the form introduction letter that you have as part of your report, and you have fields where you're just going to be placing the information. We've seen people use this for doing invoices, which you can do to create an invoice that appears in the report itself, pulling from the information. that's there, or doing certificates like InterNACHI has their monster inspected certification, and they'll use that to fill in the client's information on the certificate. So there's a lot that you can do with this. And we'll get into some of the more detailed forms where it's actually state or organization forms. We'll take a look at that here in a little bit. So for my basic information document, I just created a Word document that has the labels that are going to appear on the actual page. Now, this is a Word document, and Home Inspector Pro only is able to look at PDFs. So if you are creating a document in Word, such as like a letter or a form or something like that, you would need to go and actually either save as, and I'm just going to pick a location, save the type as PDF, or you can go to under export, there's an option to create /PDF/XPS. If you're using another software other than Word, where it may not have the direct export option there, you can also go to print, and if you're on Windows, use the Microsoft print to PDF functionality to print this to a PDF. Or if you're doing this on a Mac, you on any print dialog, you also have the option in the lower left-hand corner for PDF, which allows you to save this document as a PDF. So there's a lot of different options. Same with Google Docs, they have the ability to export PDF. The core thing that has to be done is you do have to save it as a PDF. So I'm going to go to create PDF, and I'm just throwing this on my desktop, inspection, general info, publish. Now this document just has labels, and you can see this opens up in Adobe Acrobat Reader. I have my information here, but there's no actual forms. So the next thing I'll have to do is put this in a fashion that has forms. And so I have my PDF here, and I'm going to go into my PDF editor, and I'm using PDF Exchanger. There you go. So I go to open. I'm going to go to my desktop and inspection general info. And so I see that same information, and I'm going to go to the form tab. In most of the PDF editors, you're going to have the option to create a form tab. And so then you're going to go through and define the different fields of information. And there are a number of different fields of information that you're able to handle. The most common that people are going to work with are a text field, which is where you're actually entering in free-form text that you're able to type in, checkboxes, or radio buttons. Those are the three most common that are used with forms that people are going to be working with. So I'm going to pick text, and I can literally just drag and drop what I want the text to be. As I create the fields, it's going to have just a generic name, whether it's going to be a text field or text or whatever it's going to be. And it's a good, you could leave those as generic, but for actually populating these, you're going to want to have them have unique names. So this is going to be the field name. And so you want to have it be appropriate. So I'm just going to be a client name. You can include spaces in the names. Pretty much you can put whatever you want in the names. One thing you may want to avoid colons, because we use that for another piece of functionality, and we'll take a look at that here in a little bit. So the client name. And so then I'm just go through and create the various fields. Now, some of the fields are going to be broken up into parts, such as like the inspection address. You have the actual, if you want to include the street address, as well as the city, state, and zip, you would create these as separate fields. So I'm going to do is inspection address. And so we could do separate ones for city, and state, or it may be redundant to have that because you know what state you're in because you're probably located to a smaller area. So maybe just zip. Inspector name. I'm going to do all these real quick. Inspector name. Now, this process of actually creating the fields and defining how they're going to look and everything is going to, it takes a bit of trial and error, because you're going to want to see how these look when you actually go to generate the forms and seeing if there's enough room that you're giving for the fields. So it's not something where you're going to get it right on the first time. As you do it more, you'll get more familiar with it. But one thing to keep in mind with how we actually format the PDFs and the text that appears in them, we actually don't do any formatting as part of the Home Inspector Pro program. We actually follow all of the formatting of the PDF. And so when you're actually creating the PDF, you're able to define the formatting of the fields. So in the case of text fields, you would be able to specify the font and the size and how the font wraps and all those type of things. You're able to specify those as part of your as part of the PDF. And you'll see, I'll take a look at that here in one sec. So, and an important thing to do as part of this is it's a good idea to be consistent in how you do this, so it appears professional when you have customers actually receiving these forms. So for example, I have the client name. Oops, I don't need that one. I'm gonna go back to select fields. So if I select on the client name, you'll see I have the name there, but then I have the style. So how is it going to fill it? If it's going to fill the form in with colors, if there's borders around it, and then the default text format. So I can specify the font, and then you have the font size. If you have it set to auto, it's going to scale the font to the size to fit in the field. And so what some people will sometimes find is when they are populating this information, they may have the text that actually appears on the PDF that's generated is going to vary depending on the field, because some fields are going to be really short, some are going to be really long, they have a additional area. And so it may be inconsistent when you're actually specifying this information. So I usually recommend that people go through and actually be specific about how big do you want the text to be. So in this case, I'm going to have this one set to Arial and 11. You can change the alignment. If you're going to have fields where you have the possibility that it's going to run to more than one line of text, you'll want to pay attention to multi-line. If this is set to no, it will force the text that's actually going to appear. It'll just cut off at the end of the field, even if it goes to multiple lines. So if you are actually doing longer narratives or comments, you'll want to have those set to multi-line yes. That way it'll wrap to multiple lines. You can also have it whether it's going to be spaced and a little bit more information. We're not going to worry about the actions or anything. But so we have the general fields. One thing that can be helpful when you're going and setting these to make your fields more consistent is you can hold down the control key on your keyboard and actually pick each of the fields. So this allows you to select all those fields. And I'm going to set the font size to 11. And this is going to make it so that all the fields are going to be set to 11. So they'll have a consistent font and size as they'll appear in the saved PDF. Now you can also create fields such as checkboxes, which is literally just a checkbox where it's going to be yes or no, it's on or off. The radio buttons work in a similar fashion because we're going to be populating from an external source. The idea is that you could have multiple ones and only one could be selected. Since we address them each separately, you can have more than one selected. So in most cases, people are going to treat those like checkboxes and actually use them as that way. There is the option for signature, and signature is intended to actually have a field that is able to have a signature inserted into it. Now within Home Inspector Pro, you have the ability to collect the inspector signature and the client signature, and you are able to map those signature fields to the signature that is in Home Inspector Pro. So if you are collecting a signature, you could include that information as well. I'm not going to worry about that right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and save. And that saved the PDF that I created. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Then we get to within the Home Inspector Pro program. So I have an inspection that I have opened up. This is the default template. Let me go ahead and import. Let's see, can I import some data from ISN? Oh, I don't have any ISN data in. So let's import it from HIP Office. Yeah, I don't have any HIP Office inspections either. There are some inspections. So I'm going to go ahead and import this in. So I have some client and some client information here. So when to insert the actual form and apply it to a inspection or to a template, you can go to insert PDF documents in the toolbar. And this is normally where you can also insert in static documents, such as an introduction, additional information, like marketing materials, maintenance information, just general information that applies for every inspection. You can also insert in information that is specific to a given inspection. And all of this is done by clicking on Add Document, selecting a PDF, and I'm going to go ahead and just pick one at random. So downloads, and hey, there's a big one. And so this is one. Once you add a PDF document, on the right-hand side, you'll see it's right by default at the end of the report. You can put it into any section, such as after the table of contents, after the cover page, or actually at the beginning of the report. I'm going to leave this at the end of the report. And what makes it, whether it's a one-off or one-off addition to an inspection or applying to every inspection, is whether you save to template. If you save it to template, it's going to copy this into the Home Inspector Pro folder for use in the future with this inspection. You also have the option to ignore page margins, which by default, when you actually generate the report, if ignore page margins is turned off, it's going to fit it within the border. So it's going to resize it to fit within the borders of the page. If ignore page margins is turned on, it's going to fill the page to be the full size. And you'll see for like the introduction document, we have this as save to the template and ignore page margins. Now you can see what PDFs have been added to the Home Inspector Pro folder. Easiest way to get there is to right click on your Home Inspector Pro icon and click on Open File Location. If you're on a Mac, you would go to your Documents folder and Home Inspector Pro. And there's the Documents Vault folder. And the Documents Vault folder is where the actual documents that are associated with any of your templates are going to be located. And you'll see there are a number of them that are already included in here, such as the introduction document, and there's a PDF and a corresponding JPEG. There is also one in here, there's the introduction document .docx, and this is the Word document that the introduction document is based on. So if people want to modify this in the future, you can use that. There are also other template saved PDFs that are associated with some of the templates, such as the Florida 4-point roof certification, wind mitigation. There are different variations in there. And so when we add a template or a PDF form to the template and check to save it to the template, it's going to copy it in here. So we'll do just that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a form. And I had saved that PDF that I modified on the desktop. And so there we go. And notice I clicked on Add Form instead of Add Document. Add Document is to add a static document to your template or inspection, whereas Add Form is specific for adding in form fillable forms. And you'll notice it has a button on the right-hand side for Fill and Print Form. When I click on this button, it's going to go through and you'll see all the fields that I created as part of that editing of the PDF that I did before. And to the right, you have 3 dropdowns. And these 3 dropdowns allow you to either specify a location in your template, such as like inspection details and attendance. I'm going to go ahead and set those black. Or in the 3rd column, it allows you to pick from variables of information that is available from the client, the inspector, or the agent. So in the case of the client name, I'm going to pick client name 1, city, inspection city, inspection address. And these are grouped together by client inspection. Oh, that's inspector address. So I actually need to. Here we go. Client inspection address, client inspection city. So they're grouped by client, inspector, and agent. So client zip, inspector name. There we go. Inspector company. Go to the bottom for agent name, agent company. So for the pieces of information that are not stored as part of the client, agent, or inspector, such as the people present, the home type, or the occupancy, this is then going to be mapped to the locations in the template where they're going to be listed. So I have inspection details, attendance. Home type is going to be inspection details and home type. And inspection details is occupancy. Now, these are very basic entries that you can be pulling from. You can create any number of areas where you're going to be collecting the information from. And it is good to take some time to map out how you want to have the different pieces of information located within the template, because you want to reduce the number of clicks that your inspectors are going to have to do as part of collecting the information. And some of that comes down to how the templates are organized. And we'll take a look at that in one sec. We're just doing a very simple example. So I'm going to hit save form. And if I go to inspection details, so I'm going to pick attendance. So the client is present, buyer's agent's present, home type is attached, single family home, ranch style. Occupancy is going to be occupied and furnished. And now if I generate this report and click on select sections with comments, ratings, or photos, the only thing it's populated is the report summary and the inspection details. And we're going to do a form test. And this is going to open up in whatever the default PDF is, viewer, which I believe is Adobe Reader. Mm-hmm. One second to open. No, that's why. Issue with Adobe Reader. One sec. Okay, now if I generate it again, it'll actually show up. Now I generated that, and so after the report introduction, it's at the end of my report. Let's see. So there's the fields of information, and it populated all the client information. And so you may want to turn off the borders and everything. But the people present and the template specific items are not populating. The reason for that is in addition to specifying the location of where those fields are, there's an additional piece of information we need to apply to these entries. And this is part of what is set up as part of your template. If I go back to fill and print form, there's the actual name of the field. So people present, home type, and occupancy without a space in between them. Actually, if I question is, how do you rearrange the order of the preloaded document sections or delete a preloaded okay. So I'm going to populate form. There's nothing there. So I'm going to go ahead and save my form. On the right-hand side, you can change the order by just say, for example, I want one after the table of contents. You could drag and drop the order here. If there's ones you want to remove, you can click on remove document, and that removes it from the template. So we have those fields of people present, home type, and occupancy. We need to actually have a way that the program knows which pieces of information to take. So I'm going to go to general information and inspection details. And on each of the fields where you're collecting information, you use a note field for this. And so at the beginning, a note is where we click on add note. And you'll see it has the option with the note with the double square brackets in between it. And we're going to replace the word note with people present. And since I'm doing this with multiple fields, I'm going to go ahead and actually copy this So right click on that and copy. And I'm going to apply this to each of the fields that are here. Now there, oh, it didn't take the brackets. That's weird. Now there are ways you could have one field. If you were to use the list functionality, you could just have one piece of content there. Oh, it's because when I selected it, it didn't do that. And that way you would have just one entry that would have that selected. So I'm going to have those highlighted, and you could do it for all of the entries here. So I'm going to do the same thing for home type. You don't have to use the add note field. You just have to put in the double square brackets. Make sure that you do both the starting and ending entries. Otherwise, it won't be able to tell that they are the same thing, that they are linked to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and that's not ringing a bunch for you guys. And same thing for occupancy. And so now that I have those specified, you'll see at the beginning it has that key that matches the name that is under Insert PDF Documents. When I go and fill and print form, I can click on Populate Form, and now it pulls the values that I have had entered in there. And so I'm able to see what data it's going to actually be pulling into the field. So if I then save form, I'm going to go ahead and generate the report again. And so I did it after the table of contents. See, it's now populating those values that I specified in there. And it's because it's saying, take these fields with this key value and populate it into these fields on the PDF. And so this way you're able to pick any number of values that are there. Now, in the case of text fields where we are just actually pulling the text from a field, in this case where it's pulling the value of home type, we have it specified that it is, we have the key value at the beginning, so in this case occupancy, and then the actual words. And this is what actually appeared in the report, is that actual full text. Now, if you're doing a field that is a checkbox, you don't actually have to have any text after the key field. It's going to just say, oh, you have this selected, check the box. So for a text field, it's reading everything after the double square brackets is going to be used for the key for the actual text that appears in the field. If you're doing a checkbox or radio button, you just have to specify the key field and have that selected, and it says, okay, that's what's going to appear. And so that way, if you're going to be doing a situation where you have multiple checkboxes, your inspectors just have to actually check the box to appear. Or select the entry. They don't have to enter any actual values. It'll just pull whatever values involved. Now, when you get into more complicated forms, such as, let's go ahead and actually look at let's see. Let's go ahead and open up a different template or a different PDF. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and do this. So I have this entered in here. I have it saved to template. I could ignore the page margins. This way it's going to fit better on the screen because it is resizing it. So there's a bunch of margin here because it's resizing it to be about an inch from each of the sides. If I ignore the page margins, it'll be a full 8.5 by 11 on the page. The other option here is I can put in a bookmark. And when you're looking at the PDF, it has a bookmark down the left-hand side of the page that has like the cover page, a report summary, table of contents. This adds a label on the left-hand side, general information. And so this is what's going to appear on the left-hand side. And then if I save the template, I'm going to go ahead and save this to my default template. We'll now see in the Documents Vault folder it copied in. Oh, I need to refresh that. Refresh. Oh, here we go. Template general information. So it has the PDF in there. Now in your template, if we go back to fill and print form, you'll see there's a column here for NS. And what this is for is if this is information that doesn't change really ever, this is where you can click on that and it's going to change it to ST. And what that stands for is NS is not static and ST is static. That means that if it's set as static, this is going to be the same value every time you generate the report. And so things like company information or the inspector's address, that type of stuff, you would want to have set as static because it's never going to change. That way it just is less information to remember to populate, especially if it's coming from another source aside from the client information or the license. So this could be things like if there's an additional license information that is stored as part of the template. It could be, yeah, and that's the most common one that people do, but where it doesn't change per inspection, but it requires that you select something. Setting it as static makes it so it only has to pull that value once. For things that are for like clients or agents where it may change for every inspection, you don't want those to be static. The key is that for every inspection, you do have to click on populate form to actually populate the values that are going to appear in this section. So then we save the form and then you generate the report and that's what's going to appear. So to look at something that has a more complex method of collecting the information, we're going to actually look at the Citizens Insurance 4-point. And this is where it is a organization or a state-defined form that has a lot of fields of information. And so we're going to, let me go ahead and open up that template or that PDF. And so this is on the desktop, so HIP, Pro, and Documents Vault. And so I have my Citizens Insurance 4-point. There we go. And so this is a form that has a lot of information in addition to things like the circuit breakers, a lot of checkboxes where there are things grouped together, such as like where there's there's a dozen options here of where you're going to be collecting the information. And actually somewhere there's more, where there's like 15 just in one panel of information. When we actually go and look at a given field, one thing you'll notice as part of this is if I click, say, for example, dishwasher, it has a long field name. And the field name actually has a common value. So plumbing conditions. And then if I do this, click a different field for refrigerator, washing machine, you'll notice it has plumbing conditions at the beginning. And the font is kind of small here, but there's 2 colons in between the different options. So plumbing conditions, double colon, washing machine, satisfactory. And then if we look at the one for washing machine unsatisfactory, and you can actually see in the tooltip there, it has plumbing conditions, double colons, washing machine unsatisfactory. What that allows you to do, when we were looking at the templates before, where we with our general information form, we just came in here and it had one line for every piece of information we're collecting. And so considering that some forms, I mean, there are some forms that we built out where they have 150, 200 fields of information on the form, that would create a very long screen here and would take a long time to map things out. And also a lot of that information may be redundant. So what that double colon does when we're looking at the PDF is that groups all of these entries together. So the plumbing conditions, this is going to apply for every checkbox that's in this section. And we actually see this in the 4-point form. Let me find plumbing conditions. There's electrical hazards. There we go, plumbing conditions. So what this allows you to do is if you group everything together under one grouping, we're then able to say plumbing system and general conditions, and for basically all the appliances, is it's going to be looking to this damage panel for all of those different pieces of information. So we don't have to specify them separately. One of the advantages of this is it just allows you to logically organize things on the form so they're grouped together. But also if there are changes that end up needing to be made, you don't have to specify for every granular field look at this section and this damage panel for this specific item, and then do it for all 15, 20 items that are on that page. You just say for this specific grouping of things, so plumbing condition, look at this section, a damage panel, and then it's going to look for these key values. And so when we actually go and apply the, take a look, save anyway. If we go under plumbing system, there's just a tab where we have specified general conditions, and we have a list of all of those different conditions grouped together. So like, here's the dishwashers, here's the refrigerators, and so on. Now, since these are checkboxes, as I mentioned before, it just looks for the fact that does whatever we have highlighted, so highlighted is black, does whatever this comment is, does it include this chunk of code as the key? Now there's additional text here for like the dishwasher, colon, and the label, and then the value NA. The reason that's there is just to make it clear for the inspector, so it's visually there. This also allows, if you wanted to have this included on the report, you could have this section as part of the report. And so because the key is between the double square brackets, anything in between those doesn't appear on the report. So what will actually appear on the report is just dishwasher, colon, NA. If you do have that section appear on the report, this is all that will actually appear on the report. The form entry will just see the key that is there, and it will just check the box on the form. And so it allows you to have a combination of those two different entries that are there. And then you may have situations where there are fields that are going to be considered like where they give you an other value. In this case, if unsatisfactory, please provide the comments or details. Then we have a separate form field that is a one you'll see is set to multi-line yes, and so it puts multiple lines of text, but it's going to read whatever is after these double square brackets, so the inspector can mark this as black and then just type in whatever they want, and this is what's going to appear on the PDF. For example, we'll just to have that appear, I'm just going to pick some text, copy that, and so I'm going to mark that one as red and this one as red. When I go back to insert PDF documents, fill and print form, if I populate that form, oh, that text is really long. So notice it checked dishwasher NA is going to be checked. And then if we keep going down a little bit, there's the explanation. It then pulls all the value after the text that I put in there. And because I put in a really long block of text, it is showing out, is causing the screen to scroll. But I can then save the form anyway. And if I generate the report, you'll notice in this text, I can actually go ahead and nothing is checked to print except the photos tab. If I generate this report, it has the cover page and then the photos, because I have a page for the photos. It then includes the form, and it'll include, those are the items that I checked to be satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and includes the text here that I specifically copy and pasted in there, or I would have typed in there. Now, this is one reason you may want to go through and check the bookmark option. When you go and generate the report, it'll actually be a defined entry on the page on the left-hand side of the bookmarks. But you'll notice that the PDF is there. I'm going to go ahead and go to page level, to the cover, and then it just has the form. Now I have the 4-point form on the left-hand side. This is where it adds the bookmark in, but it has the full text and it populates everything. You'll notice that it doesn't actually have a defined section on the left-hand side where it breaks these out like it would with a normal template. Some people want to include those with the actual form. Some people don't. The PDF that is inserted by default is not going to have its own section area unless you specify a bookmark that's going to appear on the left-hand side. But basically, by the fact that you have populated the PDF with data causes it to be included in the report. If you don't populate the PDF, actually go to the view and click on populate form, it's not going to appear there. If I don't come here, fill in print form and click on populate form at the top, then that form is not going to be included in the report. I could, if I wanted to, go to generate the report and check to include, well, select sections with comments, ratings, or photos, include the photos, include the plumbing system, include the report summary in the table of contents, to make sure that my PDF is closed before I generate it again, and save. And so now it has the table of contents with my 4-point form as an entry in there, the report summary where I have my items that I marked to be included in the summary, and it has the plumbing section. Notice it doesn't have the key values in there. It just has the entries I checked off there. So it's up to you whether or not you want to actually include those sections in the report or not. Now, as part of this, some people, especially for the state or organization type forms where you need to include those, you may not be doing these as standalone inspections. You may be doing these as part of another inspection. And so what you can do is you could have these forms as part of your normal inspection template. Like I did with the general information form, I just added that in there. In the case of like the 4-point or WinMit or anything like that, where it is a larger form and it may be a lot of fields to remap, what you can instead do is you could merge that inspection into your normal template. One thing to pay attention to is when I go to save template, and I'm just going to save over my existing one, it's going to pop up and say a PDF with the same name already exists in the Documents Vault folder. Because we didn't add a different PDF, and we may change this, it's asking, do you want to, is this the same PDF that you added to, or that you're modified with this template? So usually you're just going to hit OK. But basically, it's just making sure the PDF that is stored in the Documents Vault folder is the same one that you had previously assigned to this template. So say, for example, I want to include my WinMit form, because you could do your regular inspection and like your 4-point and your WinMit, do them as 3 independent inspections, and that's fine. And on the mobile, you could do those as 3 independent inspections, and then do them, send each report separately through ISN or HIP Office, where it's 3 distinct reports. That is an option. One of the downsides to doing that, though, is you don't have the common images that you may take as part of the 4-point would not be available to use for your WinMit. So one of the things that you could do is you could have, if you wanted to, you could have those forms as part of your template. Now, one thing to keep in mind is there's not a way to merge templates to templates. So what you would need to do is you could open up your WinMit, for example. So open up my WinMit. And what I actually need to do is then save this inspection, because you can merge inspections together, but not templates. And so what I'll do is I'll title this WinMit blank. And I'm saving this blank win mitigation as an inspection. I can then go to my default template. So for example, default template. And go to File and Import/Merge Another Inspection. And pick WinMit blank. So this is the inspection I created based on the blank win mitigation. Go back to Home Inspector Pro. And you'll see there's now a menu option here for Merged Inspection 1. And it has the win mitigation options here. I can then go to Edit Template and rename this to, say, WinMit. And hit OK. And if I go under the Insert PDF Documents, I now have my win mitigation form here, and it already has the mappings in place. And so what will happen is, if you're doing a residential inspection, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Save Template. And if you change the file name when you're doing a Save Template, this is the equivalent of doing a Save As. So do with WinMit. So if you're doing an inspection that, and yes, this is the same PDF, and it's the same PDF because I have both the form and my general information form and my wind mitigation. If I'm doing an inspection on the mobile, and it does not have a wind mitigation, literally, I do nothing. If I do nothing, don't come to the fill and print form, don't click populate form, the wind mitigation PDF is not going to be included in the report. If I do populate that information, then this will be included in the report, and you would then decide where you want it to appear. Do you want it to appear in the wind mitigation section? And so we could change the order of this. So maybe that the wind mitigation photos appear. Oh, I would need to change that in my print order to change the order of those sections. So under report settings and section colors and print order, I could change wind mit photos to be below the wind mitigation. There we go. Now it updates the order. So it's going to have the wind mitigation section with this form after it with the wind mit photos. And so I may want to change the bookmark to wind mitigation. But so if I populate this form, then this is going to be included in addition to my normal default template. You can do the same thing with your 4-point, merge them all together so you have one combined template that has all together. You could also do these separately, whereas if you do your default template, you do separately your 4-point and do your wind mit all on the mobile, and then after before you generate the report, you can always do the import / merge and other inspection at that point. Instead of having a combined template, you combine the inspections after the fact and just have them all in one report. Or you could do them all as 3 independent reports, upload them to or send them off to the client as 3 independent reports. So it's up to you whichever way you choose. There isn't really a best way to do it. It comes down to personal preference. The one benefit, if you do have them as a combined template, it is easier, especially if you're using an iOS device and you're not saving your full-size images. This would make it a little bit easier because you would have all the photos immediately available. But again, it's trial and error, see what works best for you. So, okay. So in general, that covers the gist of what we were going over. Oh, you know what? I was incorrect. There is one more thing to cover for signatures. If we look at the, I gotta share my screen again. When we're on a screen like the wind mitigation, where there is a field that has the signatures, there's a location for the inspector signature and the homeowner signature. And so you have the option, we have these able to be chosen from variables. So if you have saved the inspector signature, which I have not, under report settings and inspector signature, so I'm going to go ahead and add an external signature, and I probably don't have one. Downloads. I have no idea what those images are. We're going to pretend this is a signature. So when I actually go to fill and print the form, if I select inspector signature, it's going to fill in the signature there. And again, this is something that's usually going to be static, maybe not for the homeowner, because this would come from the client signature field. This allows you to specify that. If there's a field that generally just has a static image that allows it to be inserted in, such as like a company logo, or company logo is one of the variables there, or maybe like an organization logo, you could always have that as this allows you to manually add or update an image there. But generally, this is intended for fixed images that apply for every inspection. And we're looking at different options for how to change that in the future. So, okay, so were there any questions? Don't know if Bob's actually there, but we'll find out. Okay, well, if you do have any questions, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, that'll do it.